The dust cloud rose behind Zelda Sullivan's mare as she galloped into Council Bluffs, Iowa, her auburn hair whipping behind her like a banner of defiance against the hot summer wind of 1878. She had ridden hard from her family's failing ranch 20 miles south, her father's desperate words still echoing in her mind about the bank's foreclosure notice and their last chance to save everything they had built over the past 15 years. The town sprawled before her, a collection of weathered wooden buildings and false-fronted stores that lined the main street, bustling with afternoon activity as merchants hawked their wares and cowboys lounged outside the saloons, watching the world pass by with lazy interest. Zelda dismounted outside the First National Bank, her boots hitting the dusty street with determination, as she tied her mare to the hitching post and straightened her riding skirt, trying to look more composed than she felt. At 22 years old, she had helped her father run their cattle ranch since her mother died 5 years ago, learning every aspect of the business from branding to bookkeeping. But none of that knowledge could conjure up the $3,000 they needed to satisfy their debt. Inside the bank, the clerk barely looked up from his ledger as she approached, his dismissive attitude making her blood boil even before she explained her situation. "Miss Sullivan, your father was already here last week," the clerk said in a bored tone, finally deigning to meet her eyes. "The bank's decision is final. Unless you can provide the full payment by the end of August, the property will be seized and auctioned to cover the outstanding loan." "That's only 6 weeks away," Zelda protested, gripping the edge of his desk. "Surely there must be some extension possible, some arrangement we could make. My father has been a customer here for 15 years. Sentiment does not pay debts, Miss Sullivan." The clerk returned his attention to his ledger, clearly considering the conversation finished. Zelda wanted to argue further, but she recognized the futility in it. Men like this saw women as decorative creatures incapable of understanding business matters, and nothing she said would change his mind. She turned on her heel and walked back into the afternoon sunlight, her mind racing through increasingly desperate possibilities. Selling their remaining cattle would not bring in enough money, not with the drought affecting pasture quality and driving prices down. Taking on additional work might help, but 6 weeks was hardly enough time to earn that kind of money through honest labor. She was so lost in thought that she nearly collided with a tall figure coming out of the general store next door. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her before she could stumble backward. "Whoa there, careful now," a deep voice said, warm with amusement. Zelda looked up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen, set in a tanned face that was handsome in a rugged, sun-weathered way. The man wore a well-made brown Stetson hat, a crisp blue shirt, and denim pants that showed he was no stranger to hard work. But the quality of his leather boots and the silver buckle on his belt suggested he was not lacking in funds. He had to be in his mid-20s, with dark brown hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar and a strong jawline that sported a day or two of stubble. "I apologize," Zelda said, stepping back from his grasp, though part of her missed the warmth of his hands immediately. "I was not paying attention. No harm done," he smiled, revealing even white teeth. "You look troubled, if you do not mind me saying so. Anything a stranger might help with." Zelda almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. "Unless you have $3,000 you are looking to give away, I doubt it." His eyebrows rose with interest rather than offense at her sharp tone. "That is a considerable sum. What would a lady need with that much money?" Something about his genuine interest, or perhaps just her desperate need to voice her frustration to someone, made Zelda explain. "My father's ranch is being foreclosed on by the bank. We have until the end of August to pay our debt or lose everything." 15 years of work gone because 2 bad winters and a drought left us short. The man listened attentively, his expression thoughtful. The Sullivan Ranch south of here, I have heard of it. Good land, or it was before the dry spell hit. You know it? Zelda asked, surprised. I am Caleb Quinton, he said, extending his hand. I own the Quinton Ranch about 40 miles west, near the Missouri River. Just came into town for supplies and to conduct some business. Your father has a solid reputation as a fair dealer, from what I have heard. Zelda shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip and the calluses that marked him as a working rancher, not just a landowner who hired others to do his labor. Zelda Sullivan, that reputation does not seem to count for much at the bank. Banks care about numbers, not character, Caleb agreed. It is one of the failures of modern finance, but there might be options you have not considered. Such as? Zelda asked, though she tried not to let hope creep into her voice. Caleb glanced up and down the street, then gestured toward a small restaurant across the way. Have you eaten? We could discuss possibilities over a meal. My treat, and I promise I am not in the habit of accosting young ladies with ulterior motives. My mother raised me better than that. Zelda knew she should be more cautious about accepting invitations from strange men, but something about Caleb Quinton seemed trustworthy. Perhaps it was the frank openness in his eyes, or the way he spoke to her as an equal rather than a silly female to be humored. Besides, she was hungry, having skipped breakfast in her rush to reach town, and the restaurant was public enough to ensure propriety. All right, she agreed. But I am buying my own meal. I do not accept charity. Caleb grinned at that. Fair enough. I respect a woman with pride, though there is a difference between charity and hospitality. They crossed the street together, dodging a freight wagon hauling supplies to one of the general stores. The restaurant was a modest establishment called Martha's Kitchen, run by a plump woman in her 50s who greeted Caleb like an old friend. Mr. Quinton, good to see you again, Martha said, wiping her hands on her apron. Your usual table, please, Martha. And whatever the lady would like to eat, add it to my bill despite her protests. Zelda opened her mouth to object, but Caleb held up a hand. Consider it payment for your company and conversation. A man gets tired of eating alone and you would be doing me a favor. When he phrased it that way, Zelda found it harder to refuse. They settled at a table near the window where they could watch the street traffic, and Martha brought them water and menus written on a chalkboard. The pot roast is excellent, Caleb suggested. And the apple pie is worth saving room for. Pot roast sounds wonderful, Zelda agreed, realizing just how hungry she was. After they ordered, Caleb leaned back in his chair and studied her with those penetrating blue eyes. So tell me about your ranch. What kind of cattle do you run? How large is your herd? Zelda found herself relaxing as she talked about the ranch, describing their 200 acres of grazing land, the breeding program her father had started with quality Hereford stock, and the dreams they had of expanding once they got past their current financial difficulties. Caleb listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions that showed he understood the cattle business thoroughly. We had built the herd up to nearly 300 head before the troubles started, Zelda explained. Then the winter of '76 hit hard. We lost about 40 head to the cold and snow. The next winter was almost as bad. Then this drought started, and we have had to sell off cattle at poor prices just to keep feed for the remaining stock and pay operating expenses. We are down to about 150 head now, barely half what we had. It has been a rough few years for everyone in ranching, Caleb said sympathetically. I have been fortunate with better water access from the river, but even I have felt the pinch. The market prices have been terrible. Their meals arrived, and Zelda discovered Caleb had not exaggerated about the quality. The pot roast was tender and flavorful, accompanied by roasted potatoes and carrots that melted in her mouth. As they ate, Caleb told her about his own ranch, which he had inherited from his father 3 years ago when both his parents died in a typhoid outbreak that swept through the region. "I was just 22, same age you are now," he said. Suddenly responsible for a 2,000-acre ranch, 30 ranch hands, and a herd of over 1,000 head. It was overwhelming at first, but I had good men working for me who helped me through the transition. My father had built a solid operation, and I have tried to maintain his standards while making improvements where I can. 2,000 acres, Zelda repeated, unable to hide her amazement. That is 10 times our size. Size is not everything, Caleb said quickly. Quality matters more than quantity. From what I know of your father's reputation, he raises good stock. That counts for a lot. And you should not sell yourself short, either. How many women your age could discuss cattle breeding and range management the way you just did? You clearly have a head for the business. Zelda felt warmth in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the hot coffee Martha had brought. She was not accustomed to men complimenting her intelligence rather than her appearance. Not that she considered herself particularly beautiful anyway, with her freckled nose and practical manner, but the few suitors who had approached her over the years seemed interested only in acquiring a wife who could cook and bear children, not a partner who understood ranch work. "Thank you," she said. "My father taught me everything. He said if I was going to inherit the ranch someday, I needed to know how to run it properly. Of course, that inheritance might not mean much if we lose the property." Caleb set down his fork and looked at her seriously. "That brings us back to your problem. Have you considered taking on a business partner? Someone who could invest capital in exchange for a share of the ranch?" "We have considered it," Zelda admitted. "But finding someone willing to invest in a struggling operation has proven difficult. Most men with that kind of money would rather start their own ranch or buy up foreclosed properties at auction prices." "That is true," Caleb acknowledged. "But I might have another suggestion. It is unconventional, so hear me out before you dismiss it." Zelda leaned forward, curiosity piqued. "I am listening." "There is a horse race scheduled for mid-August, about 4 weeks from now. It is a big event that draws entries from all over Iowa and Nebraska. The winner takes a prize purse of $5,000. Zelda's heart jumped. $5,000 would be enough to pay their debt and have money left over for operating expenses. But then reality set in. "I do not have a horse that could compete in a race like that, let alone win. And even if I did, the entry fee for such a race must be considerable." $200, Caleb confirmed. "Which I know might as well be 2,000 given your current situation, but I have a proposal. I was planning to enter the race myself on my stallion Thunder. He is fast, very fast. I have won several races with him over the past 2 years. However, I am intrigued by your situation and impressed by your determination. What if we made a wager first, you and me? A private race, just the two of us. If you can beat me, I will sponsor your entry in the big race with Thunder, and we will split the winnings if you take the prize. 60% to you, 40 to me, which would give you 3,000 for your debt." Zelda stared at him, trying to understand why he would make such an offer. "Why would you do that? You do not know me, and no offense to my mare, but she is a good ranch horse, not a racing animal. I would have no chance of beating you in a fair race." Caleb's expression turned thoughtful, almost vulnerable. "Honestly, because I like you. I have been in town for 3 days now, conducting business and feeling bored and isolated in the evenings. In the past hour, talking with you has been the most engaged and interested I have felt in months. You are intelligent, passionate about your work, and willing to fight for what matters to you. Those are qualities I admire, and maybe I am a romantic fool, but I believe in helping people when I can. Consider it an investment in a fellow rancher. But you said I would have to beat you in a race first, Zelda pointed out. On my ranch, mare against your prize stallion. That seems like a safe bet on your part that you will never have to make good on the offer. Perhaps, Caleb said, his eyes twinkling. Or perhaps I am a better judge of horseflesh than you give me credit for. What is your mare's name, Rosie? Zelda said. She is 8 years old, a quarter-horse mix with good endurance and a steady temperament, but she has never been trained for racing. Sometimes raw talent matters more than training, Caleb said, and I suspect you are a better rider than you realize. So what do you say? Tomorrow morning, we race from here to the old oak tree at Miller's Creek and back, about 6 miles total. If you win, I sponsor your entry in the main race. If I win, well, nothing really changes for you except you spend a morning getting some exercise and trying something different. It seemed too good to be true, which made Zelda suspicious. But looking into Caleb's open, honest face, she could not detect any deception or ulterior motive. At worst, she would lose a race she expected to lose anyway. At best, she might gain an opportunity to save her family's ranch, even if that opportunity seemed impossibly slim. All right, she agreed, extending her hand across the table. You have yourself a race, Mr. Quinton. Tomorrow morning dawn, starting from the north end of town. He shook her hand firmly, his large palm engulfing hers. Dawn it is, Miss Sullivan, and please call me Caleb. If we are going to be racing partners, we should be on a first-name basis. Zelda, she said, allowing herself a small smile, and I should warn you I am a very competitive person. I do not like to lose. Good, Caleb said, his grin widening. Neither do I. That will make tomorrow morning much more interesting. They finished their meal with more pleasant conversation, steering away from business talk to more personal topics. Zelda learned that Caleb loved to read, particularly adventure novels and histories of the American frontier, and that he played a decent fiddle, having learned from his mother. He had never married, though he admitted to a brief engagement 2 years ago that ended when the woman decided she could not handle the isolation of ranch life and moved back east to Philadelphia. I cannot blame her, Caleb said. Ranch life is not for everyone, especially someone raised in the city. It takes a special kind of person to thrive out here, someone who loves the land and does not mind the hard work and loneliness. I have never thought of it as lonely, Zelda said. The land feels alive to me, full of its own kind of company. The cattle, the horses, the hawks circling overhead, the coyotes singing at night. I would go mad living in a crowded city. You understand, Caleb said softly, and something in his tone made Zelda's heart flutter. That is rare. Most people think I am strange for preferring the company of my horses to Saturday night dances in town. I would take a good horse over most people any day, Zelda agreed, then laughed. That probably says something terrible about me. It says you have good judgment, Caleb countered. When they finally left the restaurant, the sun was lowering toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Caleb walked Zelda back to where Rosie was tied outside the bank, his own horse, a magnificent bay stallion, waiting at the hitching post outside the general store. That is Thunder, Zelda asked, admiring the animal's clean lines and powerful build. That is him, Caleb confirmed with obvious pride. 16 hands, 3/4 thoroughbred, 1/4 Mustang. The thoroughbred gives him speed, the Mustang gives him endurance and intelligence. He is the best horse I have ever owned. Thunder was indeed impressive, and seeing him made Zelda realize just how outmatched poor Rosie would be in tomorrow's race. But she had given her word, and she never backed down from a challenge. "We will see you at dawn," she said, untying Rosie and mounting up. "North end of town by the blacksmith shop." "I will be there," Caleb promised. "Ride safe going home, Zelda. The roads can be dangerous after dark." "I can take care of myself," Zelda assured him, though she appreciated the concern. "Thank you for the meal and the conversation. It was the most pleasant part of an otherwise difficult day." "The pleasure was entirely mine," Caleb said, and the sincerity in his voice made her believe him. Zelda urged Rosie into a trot, heading south out of town toward home. As she rode, her mind spun with thoughts of Caleb Quinton and his unexpected offer. Part of her wondered if she had dreamed the entire encounter, if a handsome, successful rancher had really spent the afternoon with her discussing cattle and offering to help save her family's ranch. Men like that did not just appear in your life and offer solutions to impossible problems. Yet it had happened, and tomorrow morning she would race him, even knowing she had virtually no chance of winning. At least it would be an adventure, a brief escape from the grinding worry that had consumed her life for the past 2 years. And if she was being completely honest with herself, the prospect of seeing Caleb again made her heart beat a little faster in a way that had nothing to do with the race. The ride home took about 90 minutes at an easy pace, and Rosie was breathing hard by the time they arrived at the Sullivan Ranch. The property looked shabby in the fading light, the barn needing paint and several fence posts requiring replacement, all maintenance they had deferred due to lack of funds. But the land itself was good, rolling prairie with a reliable creek running through the eastern pasture, and the house her father had built was solid and comfortable, even if it was small. Her father, Thomas Sullivan, was in the barn tending to the evening chores when she arrived. At 53, he looked older than his years, his hair completely gray and his face lined with worry. He had been a strong, vital man before her mother's death, but grief and financial stress had worn him down. "How did it go at the bank?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "As expected," Zelda said, dismounting and beginning to unsaddle Rosie. "The clerk would not budge. We have until the end of August, and that is final." Thomas nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging. "Then I suppose it is over." "We had a good run, Zelda. 15 years is more than many manage. We will have to start making plans for after the foreclosure, figure out where we will go and what we will do." "Wait," Zelda said quickly. "There might be another option. I met someone in town today, another rancher named Caleb Quinton. He told me about a horse race in mid-August with a $5,000 prize. If we could enter and win, it would solve everything." "Horse racing?" Thomas looked skeptical. "Zelda, we do not have a racing horse, and even if we did, entry fees for those big races are out of our reach." "I know," Zelda said, "but Caleb made me an offer. If I can beat him in a race tomorrow morning, he will sponsor my entry in the big race using his stallion. If I win, we split the prize money and my share would be enough to pay the bank." Thomas studied his daughter's face carefully. "This Caleb Quinton, what do you know about him? Is he trustworthy, or is this some kind of scheme?" "I think he is genuine," Zelda said. "He owns a large ranch west of here, and he seemed honest and straightforward. The worst that happens is I lose the race tomorrow and nothing changes. And the best that happens is you beat him and end up racing in a dangerous competition against experienced riders," Thomas pointed out. "Zelda, people get hurt in these races. Horses break legs, riders take falls. I already lost your mother. I cannot lose you too." Zelda put her hand on her father's arm. "I am a good rider, Father. You taught me yourself. And I am not going to let our ranch be taken without fighting with everything I have. We both know that once we lose this land, we will never get it back. This might be a slim chance, but it is a chance. Is that not worth trying?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hand covering hers. Finally, he sighed. "Your mother would say I was a fool for allowing this. But she would also say you have her stubborn streak, and there is no point trying to talk you out of something once you have set your mind to it. All right. Race your cowboy tomorrow, but promise me you will be careful." "I promise," Zelda said, hugging him tightly. "And who knows? Maybe Rosie has some hidden speed we have never discovered." Thomas chuckled without much humor. "Rosie is a fine horse, but she is built for endurance, not speed. Still, miracles can happen. I have seen stranger things in my 53 years." They finished the evening chores together, feeding the remaining cattle and chickens, checking water troughs, and securing the barn for the night. Over a simple dinner of beans and cornbread, Zelda told her father more about Caleb, carefully editing out the parts where her heart had raced at his smile, or the way his eyes had seemed to see right into her soul. Thomas listened thoughtfully, and Zelda could see him trying to judge this stranger's character based on second-hand information. "He sounds like a decent man," Thomas finally said. "Successful, too, if he owns a 2,000-acre spread. Interesting that he took such an interest in our troubles." "He said he admired my determination," Zelda said, feeling her cheeks warm, "and that he liked talking to me. We had a nice conversation over dinner." Thomas gave her a knowing look. "He is unmarried, I assume, father," Zelda protested, though she could not help smiling. "It is not like that. He is just being kind. Kind men do not offer to give away thousands of dollars to strangers," Thomas observed. "But then again, perhaps he sees something special in my daughter that makes it worth his while. You are your mother's image, you know. Same auburn hair, same determined chin, same fire in your eyes. She could light up a room just by walking into it." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. Her father rarely spoke about her mother these days, the pain still too fresh even after 5 years. "I wish she could be here to advise me. She always knew what to do." "She would tell you to trust your instincts," Thomas said, "and to go after what you want without apology. That is how she ended up married to an Irish immigrant farmer with nothing but dreams and debts. Her parents thought she was crazy, but she said she loved me and that was enough. We built this ranch from nothing, and we had 20 good years together before the fever took her. I would not trade those years for anything. That is how I feel about this land," Zelda said. "It is part of us, part of her memory. I cannot let it go without a fight." "Then you race tomorrow," Thomas said firmly. "And you ride like the wind itself is chasing you. Who knows? Maybe the luck of the Irish will finally come through for a Sullivans." Zelda went to bed that night feeling a mixture of anxiety and excitement. She knew the odds were impossibly stacked against her, but at least she was doing something active rather than just waiting for disaster to strike. And if she was being honest with herself, the prospect of seeing Caleb again filled her with an anticipation that had nothing to do with horse racing. She rose before dawn, dressing in her most practical riding clothes, a split skirt that allowed her to ride astride rather than side saddle, a simple white blouse, and her best leather boots. She braided her hair tightly to keep it out of her face, then headed to the barn where her father was already preparing Rosie. "I gave her extra oats this morning," Thomas said, and checked her shoes. "Everything looks good. She is as ready as she will ever be." "Thank you, father," Zelda said, hugging him quickly before mounting up. "Remember, keep your weight forward and your heels down," Thomas coached. "Let her have her head once you get running and do not fight the reins. And Zelda, whatever happens, I am proud of you." Zelda felt emotion clog her throat, so she just nodded and turned Rosie toward the north, toward Council Bluffs, and whatever awaited her there. The ride to town took less time than usual since she pushed Rosie to a faster pace, and the sun was just breaking over the eastern horizon when she arrived at the north end of town where the blacksmith shop stood. Caleb was already there, sitting easily on Thunder's back, and he smiled broadly when he saw her approaching. "Good morning," he called out. "I was not entirely sure you would come." "I gave my word," Zelda said, bringing Rosie alongside Thunder. In the early morning light, Caleb looked even more handsome, his blue eyes bright with anticipation and his face freshly shaved. "Are you ready for this? The question is, are you ready?" Caleb responded. "Last chance to back out with no hard feelings." "Not a chance," Zelda said firmly. "Tell me the route again." "North out of town to the old oak tree at Miller's Creek. That is about 3 miles. Circle the tree and back here. First one back wins. No rules otherwise. Take whatever path you want, just circle that tree." "Understood," Zelda said, her competitive nature fully engaged now. She adjusted her seat and gathered her reins, feeling Rosie's muscles bunch with readiness beneath her. "On 3 then," Caleb said, moving Thunder into position beside them. 1, 2, 3. Both horses leaped forward at the same instant, their hooves throwing up dirt as they charged out of town. Thunder pulled ahead immediately, his longer stride eating up the ground, but Zelda was not worried yet. She knew Rosie's strength lay in her endurance and sure-footedness, not her speed. The real test would come as the race progressed, and Thunder's blazing pace took its toll. They left the town behind quickly, following the worn road that led north through prairie grassland. Thunder maintained his lead easily, and Zelda could see why Caleb had won races with him. The stallion moved like liquid power, his gait smooth and effortless even at speed. She let Rosie find her own pace, not pushing her to match Thunder's speed but keeping him in sight as they raced across the open land. The old oak tree appeared in the distance after about 20 minutes of hard riding. A massive solitary tree that had probably stood for 100 years beside Miller's Creek. Thunder reached it first, Caleb expertly guiding him around the landmark, but as they turned back toward town, Zelda noticed the stallion's breathing was labored. Thunder was fast, but he had spent a lot of energy in that initial burst of speed. Rosie, on the other hand, was just finding her rhythm. Zelda leaned forward and loosened the reins, letting her mare stretch out, and she felt a surge of speed she had not known Rosie possessed. They began to close the gap with Thunder, yard by yard, as both horses raced back toward Council Bluffs. Caleb glanced back and saw them coming, and Zelda thought she saw a surprise flash across his face. He urged Thunder to greater speed, but the stallion was starting to flag. Meanwhile, Rosie seemed to have found a second wind, her shorter legs churning with determination as she narrowed the distance between them. The outskirts of town appeared ahead, the finish line less than a mile away. Thunder was still ahead by 2 lengths, then 1 length, and then Zelda and Rosie were pulling even with them. She could see Caleb's face clearly now, see the concentration in his expression as he urged Thunder onward. But she could also see something else, a softness in his eyes when he looked at her, something that made her heart skip a beat even in the midst of their competition. They were neck and neck now, Rosie straining with everything she had, Thunder fighting to maintain his lead despite his exhaustion. The blacksmith shop was just ahead, the finish line she had envisioned in her mind. Zelda crouched lower over Rosie's neck, whispering encouragement, feeling the mare respond with one final surge of effort. And then, just as they reached the finish line, something unexpected happened. Thunder faltered, just slightly, just enough for Rosie to pull ahead by half a length as they flashed past the blacksmith shop. Zelda could not believe it. She began to slow Rosie down, patting the mare's lathered neck with amazement and pride. Rosie had actually won. They had actually beaten Caleb and Thunder. She turned Rosie around to find Caleb doing the same with Thunder, walking the stallion to cool him down properly. When Caleb's eyes met hers, he was grinning widely. "You won," he called out, his voice full of admiration. "Fair and square, you beat me." Zelda rode over to him, still processing what had just happened. "Thunder stumbled at the end. That is the only reason we won. It was not a fair race." "Thunder did not stumble," Caleb said, dismounting to check his stallion's legs carefully. "He is fine, just tired." "You won because your mare has heart, and because you are a better rider than you gave yourself credit for. A deal is a deal, Zelda. I will sponsor your entry in the main race." Something in his tone made Zelda look at him more carefully. "Caleb, did you hold Thunder back? Did you let me win?" Caleb finished examining Thunder's legs before meeting her eyes. His expression was gentle, almost tender. "Does it matter? You still won." "Yes, it matters," Zelda said, dismounting as well. "If you let me win, then it was not a real victory, and I will not accept your sponsorship under false pretenses." Caleb was quiet for a moment, seeming to struggle with how to answer. Finally, he stepped closer to her, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his blue eyes. "All right, you want the truth. I saw how much this meant to you yesterday, how desperate you were to save your family's ranch, and when we started racing, I realized something. Somewhere between the restaurant and that oak tree, I stopped caring about winning and started caring about you. So yes, I eased up on Thunder in the final stretch. I let you win." Zelda felt a confusing mixture of emotions. Anger at being patronized, gratitude for his kindness, and something else, something warm and fluttering that came from the way he was looking at her. "Why would you do that?" she asked quietly. Caleb reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Because in the past 24 hours, you have made me feel more alive than I have in years. Because I respect your determination and your spirit. And because, even though we just met, I find myself caring deeply about what happens to you and your father. The truth is, Zelda Sullivan, you already won something far more valuable than any race." "What is that?" Zelda whispered, though her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "My heart," Caleb said simply. "You have already won my heart." The world seemed to stop for a moment as Zelda processed his words. No man had ever spoken to her like this, with such openness and vulnerability. She searched his face for any sign of deception or manipulation, but all she saw was honesty and something that looked very much like the beginnings of love. "Caleb, we barely know each other," she managed to say, though part of her wanted to throw caution aside and kiss him right there in the street. "I know," he agreed. "And I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow or make any promises you are not ready for. But I am asking you to give me a chance, give us a chance. Let me sponsor your entry in the race like I promised. Race Thunder to the best of your ability, and after, win or lose, let me court you properly. Let me prove that what I am feeling is not just some passing fancy." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes, though whether from happiness or overwhelm she could not quite say. Everything was happening so fast, and yet it also felt inevitable, as if meeting Caleb Quinton was something that had been written in the stars long before either of them were born. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "Say yes," Caleb urged gently. "Say yes to the race and say yes to letting me court you. That is all I am asking." Zelda looked at Rosie, still breathing hard from their race, then at Thunder, magnificent even in his exhaustion, and finally back at Caleb. In his face, she saw not just a handsome man or a successful rancher, but someone who understood her, who saw her as an equal, and who was willing to risk his own heart by offering her his. "Yes," she said, the word coming out stronger and more certain than she felt. Yes to both. The smile that broke across Caleb's face was like the sun coming up, warm and brilliant. He took her hand and lifted it to his lips, kissing her knuckles with old-fashioned courtesy. "You have made me very happy," he said. "Now, we should get these horses cooled down properly before we discuss the details of the big race. Is there a livery stable here in town?" "Yes, just off the main street," Zelda said, trying to gather her scattered thoughts. "But Caleb, are you sure about this? About all of it? What if I cannot win the big race? What if I let you down?" "You could never let me down," Caleb said firmly. "Whatever happens in that race, you will have tried your best, and that is all anyone can ask. But I have a feeling you are going to surprise a lot of people, yourself included. You have more potential than you realize." They walked their horses toward the livery stable, side by side, and Zelda felt as if her entire world had shifted on its axis. 24 hours ago, she had ridden into town with nothing but desperation and a failing ranch. Now she had a chance to save everything, and more surprisingly, she had found someone who seemed to see her for exactly who she was and value that person. At the livery stable, they arranged for Thunder and Rosie to be rubbed down, watered, and fed while they discussed the upcoming race. Caleb pulled a folded newspaper clipping from his pocket that advertised the event. "The Iowa Territorial Cup Race," he read aloud. "August 15th, starting from Council Bluffs, Iowa, following the old emigrant trail west for 50 miles to Fort Calhoun, Nebraska, then back. 100 miles total, which is why the prize money is so high. It is a true test of horse and rider, not just speed but endurance and strategy. There will be water stations every 10 miles, and riders are allowed to change horses at the halfway point if they have a fresh mount waiting." Zelda's stomach clenched with anxiety. 100 miles. I have never ridden that far at racing speeds. And Thunder would be starting from the livery here with no rest between here and the race. "No, I will take him back to my ranch to rest and train for the next 3 weeks, Caleb explained. "You should come with me, actually, spend time getting to know Thunder, learning his quirks and preferences. A horse and rider need to be a team to succeed in a race like this, and that takes practice. Come with you, to your ranch." Zelda's mind raced with the implications. "I cannot just leave my father alone for 3 weeks. He needs my help with the cattle." "Then bring him too," Caleb said immediately. "I have a large house with several guest rooms, and I could use an experienced cattleman's advice on some decisions I need to make about my breeding program. Your father could stay as my guest, help me with ranch work if he wants something to do, and you two would be together. Plus, it would give him a break from the stress of worrying about the foreclosure." It was an incredibly generous offer, and Zelda found herself once again questioning Caleb's motives. No one was this kind without wanting something in return, were they? As if reading her thoughts, Caleb added, "I know this all seems too good to be true. If I were in your position, I would be suspicious too. But I promise you, Zelda, I have no ulterior motives beyond winning your affection honestly. I have been lonely for a long time, running my ranch and dealing with business, but having no one to share my life with. Then I met you, and suddenly I remembered what it feels like to look forward to tomorrow. That is worth any amount of money or effort on my part." His sincerity was undeniable, and Zelda felt her last reservations crumbling. "I need to talk to my father about all of this. It is a big decision." "Of course," Caleb agreed. "Why don't you ride home and discuss it with him? I need to purchase my supplies anyway since I left the general store rather abruptly yesterday when I saw you. I will stay in town tonight at the boarding house and come out to your ranch tomorrow morning for an answer. That will give you time to think everything through carefully." "That sounds reasonable," Zelda said, grateful for the breathing room. Her emotions were in turmoil, caught between hope and fear, attraction and caution. They collected their horses from the livery stable. Both animals now cooled down and refreshed, and walked together to the edge of town where their paths would diverge. "Thank you, Caleb," Zelda said, struggling to find words adequate to express everything she was feeling. "For the race, for the opportunity, for your kindness. I do not know how to repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Caleb said. "Just give me a chance to prove myself worthy of your trust. That is all the payment I need." He helped her mount Rosie, his hands strong and steady on her waist, and for a brief moment they were close enough that Zelda could smell the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. Then she was in the saddle, looking down at him, memorizing the way the morning light played across his features. "Until tomorrow," she said. "Until tomorrow," Caleb echoed, stepping back as she turned Rosie toward home. The ride back to the ranch seemed to take no time at all, Zelda's mind spinning with everything that had happened. She found her father in the east pasture, mending a section of fence, and dismounted to help him while telling him about the race, Caleb's confession, and his invitation. Thomas listened without interrupting, his weathered hands continuing to work on the fence while his daughter talked. When she finally ran out of words, he was quiet for a long moment. "This Caleb Quinton must be quite a man," he finally said. "To inspire such loyalty in his horse and such strong feelings in my daughter after just 2 meetings." "Father, I do not know what I am feeling," Zelda admitted. "It is all so sudden, so overwhelming. Part of me thinks I am crazy for even considering his offer. But another part of me, a part I did not know existed until yesterday, is telling me that he is someone special, someone worth taking a risk for." Thomas set down his tools and turned to face her fully. "Your mother and I met on a Tuesday afternoon in Cork, Ireland. By Friday evening I had asked her to marry me. By Saturday she had said yes. Everyone thought we were mad, especially her wealthy parents, but we knew, both of us, that we had found something rare and precious. Sometimes, Zelda, you just know. The heart recognizes its match faster than the mind can catch up." "So you think I should accept his invitation?" Zelda asked. "I think you should follow your instincts," Thomas said. "If this man makes you happy, if he treats you with respect and sees your worth, then yes, give him a chance. As for the practical matters, his idea has merit. I could use a change of scenery, and learning from a successful rancher like Caleb could be valuable. Plus, if you are going to race in this big competition, you need proper training. You cannot just show up and expect to compete against experienced riders without preparation. But what about our cattle? Who will tend them for 3 weeks? We have a small enough herd now that I could hire young Peter Thompson from the neighboring ranch to check on them daily," Thomas said. "It would not cost much, and his family could use the money. The cattle will be fine. What matters is giving you the best possible chance to win that race and save our home." Zelda hugged her father tightly, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. "What if I fall in love with him, Father? What if I fall in love with Caleb and then something goes wrong?" "Then you will hurt for a while, and eventually you will heal," Thomas said practically. "But at least you will have taken the chance. I would rather see you risk your heart and lose than never risk it at all and spend your life wondering what might have been. Your mother taught me that lesson, and I will be forever grateful she did." That evening, they made plans for the trip to Caleb's ranch, deciding what to bring and making arrangements for Peter Thompson to watch their cattle. Zelda spent extra time grooming Rosie, thanking the mare for her unexpected burst of speed that morning, even if it had been aided by Caleb's intentional holding back of thunder. She lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Caleb's words. "You have already won my heart." No man had ever spoken to her with such directness, such vulnerability. Most of the men she had met treated courtship like a business transaction, evaluating her value based on her appearance and homemaking skills, rather than her character or intelligence. Caleb was different. He had seen her at her most desperate, and instead of judging her, he had offered help. He had recognized her determination and respected it. And somehow, impossibly, he claimed to be falling in love with her. The question was, could she let herself fall in love with him? Caleb arrived at the Sullivan Ranch late the next morning, driving a wagon loaded with supplies from town. He greeted Thomas with a firm handshake and appropriate respect, and Zelda watched her father size up the younger man with the critical eye of a protective parent. "Mr. Sullivan, it is an honor to meet you," Caleb said. "I've heard excellent things about your ranch and your cattle breeding program." "I appreciate that," Thomas replied, his tone neutral, "though I imagine you have heard other things as well, given our current financial difficulties." "Financial troubles do not reflect on a man's character or abilities," Caleb said seriously. "The past few years have been hard on everyone in ranching. The fact that you have managed to keep your operation going at all speaks well of your skill and determination." Thomas's expression softened slightly. "Zelda tells me you have made her a generous offer, one that seems almost too generous for a man you barely know." "I understand your caution," Caleb said. "If I had a daughter, I would be equally protective. All I can do is give you my word that my intentions are honorable. I see great potential in Zelda, both as a rider and as a person, and I would like the opportunity to know her better. The race sponsorship is as much about my desire to see her succeed as it is about anything else." "And if she does not return your romantic feelings," Thomas asked bluntly, "what happens then?" "Then I will accept that gracefully and still honor my commitment to sponsor the race," Caleb said without hesitation. "I am not trying to buy her affection, Mr. Sullivan. I am simply trying to earn the chance to prove myself worthy of it." Thomas studied Caleb for a long moment, then glanced at Zelda, who was standing nearby with bated breath. Finally, he smiled, the first genuine smile Zelda had seen on her father's face in months. "You have an honest face, Mr. Quinton, and you speak well. I accept your invitation on behalf of both myself and my daughter. When would you like us to come to your ranch?" "Is today too soon?" Caleb asked hopefully. "The race is only 3 weeks away, and the more time Zelda has to train with Thunder, the better her chances." "Today is fine with me," Thomas said. "We packed our things last night, so we are ready to travel whenever you are." They loaded the Sullivans' belongings into Caleb's wagon. Then Thomas mounted his own horse while Zelda rode Rosie. The journey to the Quinton ranch took most of the afternoon, following the road west toward the Missouri River. As they traveled, Caleb pointed out various landmarks and told stories about the history of the region. "My father bought this land in 1855, he explained. "It was still fairly wild then, with occasional conflicts between settlers and the native tribes. He started with just 100 acres and a dozen head of cattle, but he had a gift for choosing good stock and managing his money carefully. By the time he died, he had built one of the most successful ranches in Iowa." "You must miss him," Zelda said. "Every day," Caleb admitted. "He was my hero, my teacher, my best friend. Losing him and my mother in the same week was devastating, but I like to think I am running the ranch in a way that would make him proud." The Quinton ranch came into view as the sun began lowering toward the western horizon. Zelda had thought she was prepared for the scale of Caleb's operation, but actually seeing it took her breath away. The main house was a large 2-story structure built of solid timber with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Behind it stood an enormous barn that could easily hold 30 horses, multiple corrals for training and breaking horses, a bunkhouse for ranch hands, and several outbuildings for equipment and supplies. Cattle grazed in pastures that seemed to stretch forever, and the Missouri River glinted silver in the distance. "This is incredible," Zelda breathed, taking in the sight. "It is home," Caleb said, but she could hear the pride in his voice. "Come, let me show you around before dinner." "My cook, Mrs. Chen, makes the best pot roast in 3 counties, and she always prepares enough to feed an army." They spent the next hour touring the ranch while Caleb introduced them to his foreman, a grizzled old cowboy named Jack who had worked for Caleb's father for 20 years, and several of the other ranch hands. Everyone treated Caleb with obvious respect and affection, suggesting he was a good employer who took care of his people. The house interior was beautifully furnished with pieces that Caleb explained had belonged to his mother, who had excellent taste despite living on a frontier ranch. He showed Thomas to a comfortable guest room on the first floor, then led Zelda upstairs to a larger room with a view of the river. "This was my mother's sewing room," Caleb explained. "I converted it to a guest room after she died, but it has not been used much. I hope you will be comfortable here." The room was lovely, with a large bed covered in a colorful quilt, a wardrobe for clothes, a writing desk by the window, and even a small bookshelf filled with novels. "It is perfect," Zelda said honestly. "Caleb, I do not know how to thank you for all of this. Your generosity is overwhelming." "You do not need to thank me," Caleb said, moving to stand beside her at the window. They looked out over the ranch together, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Having you here, having company, having someone to share all of this with, that is thanks enough. This house has been too quiet for too long." Zelda turned to look at him, finding his blue eyes already on her. "Why did you never remarry after your engagement ended? Surely there were other women who would have been interested in a successful rancher." "There were women interested in a successful ranch," Caleb corrected gently. "That is different from being interested in me as a person. Most of the ladies I met in town saw dollar signs and property boundaries, not a man who loves to read poetry and play fiddle and sit by the river watching the sunset. They wanted to change me, mold me into something more socially acceptable. You are the first woman I have met who seems to like me exactly as I am." "That is because you are perfect exactly as you are," Zelda said, then blushed at her own boldness. Caleb's smile was radiant. "Perfect is a stretch, but I appreciate the sentiment. Come, we should go down for dinner before Mrs. Chen sends a search party for us." Dinner was indeed delicious, and Mrs. Chen, a middle-aged Chinese woman who had come to America with her late husband to work on the railroads, turned out to be not just an excellent cook, but also a warm and welcoming presence. She fussed over Zelda and Thomas like they were long-lost family, making sure their plates were full and their coffee cups never empty. Over the meal, Caleb and Thomas discussed cattle breeding techniques and ranch management, and Zelda was pleased to see her father becoming animated as he talked about his favorite subject. It had been too long since she had seen him engaged and interested in anything beyond their immediate problems. After dinner, Caleb suggested they take a walk down to the river to let their meal settle. Thomas, looking tired from the day's travel, opted to retire early to his room, leaving Caleb and Zelda to walk alone in the gathering dusk. The river was peaceful, its surface reflecting the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. They stood on the bank, listening to the water's gentle burble and the evening songs of crickets and frogs. "I used to come down here every evening with my mother," Caleb said quietly. "She loved watching the sunset over the water. She said it reminded her that no matter how hard the day had been, There was always beauty in the world if you took time to look for it. She sounds like she was a wonderful woman, Zelda said. She was. She would have liked you, I think. You have the same kind of strength she had, the same refusal to be diminished by hardship. Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. I do not feel very strong most of the time. Lately, I have felt terrified and desperate and completely out of my depth. That is when real strength matters most, Caleb said. Anyone can be strong when things are easy. True strength is continuing to fight when everything seems hopeless. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and calloused against hers. Zelda's heart began to race, but she did not pull away. Instead, she stepped closer, drawn to him like a moth to flame. Zelda, Caleb said softly, his other hand coming up to cup her cheek. I know this is happening fast, faster than is probably wise. But I need you to know that my feelings are genuine. In the 2 days since I met you, you have become the most important person in my world. I cannot explain it, but it is true. I feel it too, Zelda whispered. It terrifies me, but I feel it. This pull toward you, this sense that you are someone important, someone who was meant to be part of my life. Then let me court you properly, Caleb said. Let these next 3 weeks be about getting to know each other, not just about training for the race. Give me the chance to prove that what we are feeling is real and lasting. Yes, Zelda said, the word coming easily now. Yes, I want that. Caleb's smile was tender as he leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away if she wanted. But Zelda did not want to pull away. She rose on her toes to meet him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle, sweet, full of promise rather than demand. When they finally separated, both of them were breathing hard, and Zelda could see her own wonder reflected in Caleb's eyes. That was, she began, then could not find words. Yes, Caleb agreed, understanding without need for explanation. Yes, it was. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Zelda felt as if she was floating rather than walking on solid ground. At the top of the stairs, Caleb kissed her hand goodnight with old-fashioned courtesy before retreating to his own room down the hall. Zelda lay in bed that night, touching her lips and remembering the kiss, unable to believe how drastically her life had changed in just 48 hours. She had come to town desperate and alone, and now she had a chance to save her ranch and a man who was quickly capturing her heart. It seemed too good to be true, like a fairy tale her mother used to tell her. But it was true, all of it, and tomorrow her real training would begin. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity and emotion. Each morning, Zelda rose before dawn to work with Thunder, learning the stallion's temperament and quirks under Caleb's patient guidance. Thunder was indeed an exceptional horse, fast and powerful, but also intelligent and sensitive to his rider's moods. Zelda learned to communicate with him through subtle shifts in her weight and pressure from her legs, developing the kind of partnership that Caleb had said was essential for success. You are a natural, Caleb told her one morning after a particularly successful training run. Thunder responds to you even better than he does to me. I think he knows you need him. He is a special horse, Zelda agreed, dismounting to give the stallion a well-earned rub-down. I have never ridden anything like him. And you never will again unless you keep him after the race, Caleb said casually. Zelda's head snapped up. What do you mean, keep him? Thunder is your horse. He is my horse now, Caleb acknowledged. But if you win the race, I would like you to have him. Consider it a gift, an acknowledgement of your victory and my hope that you will want to build a breeding program around his bloodline. Caleb, I cannot accept a gift that valuable, Zelda protested. Thunder must be worth thousands of dollars. He is, Caleb agreed. but he would be in good hands with you, and I would enjoy seeing what offspring he might produce with your father's quality Hereford lines. Besides, by then I hope we will be," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, "closer than we are now. What is mine would be yours." The implication made Zelda's heart race. Was he suggesting marriage? They had not discussed anything that permanent, though their courtship had progressed rapidly over the past 3 weeks. They spent every possible moment together, talking about everything from childhood memories to dreams for the future, stealing kisses by the river in the evening and holding hands during sunset walks. Zelda had never been happier, and she could see the same joy reflected in Caleb's face. Her father had noticed, of course, and one evening he pulled her aside for a frank conversation. "You are falling in love with him," Thomas observed. "It was not a question." "Yes," Zelda admitted. "I know it is fast, but father, he is everything I never knew I wanted. He treats me as an equal, values my opinions, makes me laugh. When I am with him, I feel like I can accomplish anything." "Those are good signs," Thomas said, "and I approve of him for what that is worth. He is a good man, Zelda, with a good heart. He has been kind to me these past weeks, including me in ranch discussions, and asking for my advice like my opinion matters. That is the mark of a man who respects his elders and values experience. I think he might propose after the race," Zelda confided. "The way he talks about the future, it always includes me." "And if he does, what will you say?" Thomas asked. Zelda did not hesitate. "I will say yes. I love him, father, completely, desperately, with everything I am. The thought of going back to our ranch without him, of not seeing him every day, is unbearable." "Then I hope he does propose," Thomas said, hugging her tightly. "You deserve happiness, Zelda. Your mother would be so pleased to see you with a good man who cherishes you." The race day arrived with clear skies and moderate temperatures, perfect conditions for the grueling 100-mile course. Caleb, Zelda, and Thomas traveled to Council Bluffs the evening before, staying at the boarding house so Zelda would be well rested and thunder fresh for the competition. The town was packed with spectators and riders who had come from all over Iowa and Nebraska for the event. The prize purse of $5,000 had attracted 32 competitors, mostly men, though Zelda spotted 2 other women among the riders. The other women both looked experienced and confident, their horses sleek and well-trained, and Zelda felt her nerves kick up a notch. "You can do this," Caleb assured her as they prepared Thunder for the race. "You have trained harder than anyone, and Thunder is in peak condition. Just remember everything we practiced. Pace yourself in the beginning, save Thunder's energy for the final push, and trust your instincts." "What if I fail?" Zelda asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What if I come in last and lose everything?" Caleb took her face in both his hands, his blue eyes intense. "Then we will figure something else out. But Zelda, you are not going to fail. I have watched you train these past 3 weeks, and I have seen what you are capable of. You belong in this race, and you have every chance of winning it." He kissed her then, long and deep, pouring his confidence and love into the embrace. When they separated, Zelda felt steadier, ready to face whatever came. The race began at dawn, all 32 riders lined up across the main street of Council Bluffs. The starter's pistol cracked, and the thunder of hooves filled the air as the pack surged forward, heading west along the old Emigrant Trail toward Fort Calhoun. Zelda kept Thunder in the middle of the pack for the first 10 miles, not pushing him to lead but also not letting him fall behind. She could see the 2 other women riders near the front, their competitive natures evident in their aggressive riding style. Several male riders jockeyed for position, their horses straining to gain any advantage. At the first water station, Zelda dismounted briefly to let Thunder drink, checking his legs and breathing. He was handling the pace well, his thoroughbred endurance showing. They were currently in 12th place, which Caleb had said was a good position, keeping them out of the chaos at the front while still remaining competitive. The miles stretched on, the landscape changing from prairie grassland to more rugged terrain as they approached the Missouri River. Zelda fell into a rhythm with Thunder, their bodies moving as one, her mind empty of everything except the trail ahead and the horse beneath her. By the halfway point at Fort Calhoun, several horses had dropped out, unable to maintain the brutal pace. Zelda was now in 8th place, and she could feel Thunder still had plenty of energy left. While other riders switched to fresh horses, Zelda stayed with Thunder, trusting his endurance and their partnership. The return journey was where the real race began. The leaders started to fade as their horses tired, and Zelda began moving up through the pack. 7th place, then 6th, then 5th. Thunder was breathing hard but still responding to her commands, still willing to give her everything he had. With 20 miles left, Zelda was in 3rd place, chasing the 2 women riders who had led for most of the race. Her arms ached from controlling Thunder, her legs burned from gripping his sides, and her throat was parched despite drinking at every water station. But she pushed the discomfort aside and focused on the goal. 15 miles left, and one of the women's horses began to falter, allowing Zelda and Thunder to pass into 2nd place. Now it was just her and the lead rider, a woman named Martha Hendricks from Nebraska who had won this race the previous year. 10 miles left, and Zelda could see Council Bluffs in the distance. Martha was still ahead by 3 lengths, her chestnut mare running hard. But Zelda could see the mare's stride was off, slight but noticeable, suggesting the long race was taking its toll. 5 miles left, and Zelda made her move. She leaned forward over Thunder's neck and loosened the reins, asking him for everything he had left. The stallion responded magnificently, his powerful legs eating up the ground as they began to close the gap with Martha. 3 lengths became 2, then 1, and then they were neck and neck, racing toward the finish line in Council Bluffs with the crowd's roar growing louder. Zelda could see Caleb and her father at the finish line, both of them shouting encouragement though she could not hear the words over the pounding of hooves and blood in her ears. 2 miles left, and Martha's mare was visibly struggling. Thunder pulled ahead by half a length, then a full length, and suddenly they were in the lead with the finish line just ahead. Zelda did not dare look back, focusing everything on maintaining Thunder's pace. The stallion seemed to sense the importance of the moment, giving her one final surge of speed that carried them across the finish line a full 2 lengths ahead of Martha. They had won. Zelda could barely process it as she slowed Thunder to a walk, her entire body shaking with exhaustion and elation. They had actually won $5,000, enough to save the ranch and more. Caleb was there instantly, reaching up to help her dismount, catching her as her legs nearly gave out from fatigue. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My God, Zelda, you won." "We won," she corrected, leaning heavily against him as her father rushed over to embrace her as well. "Thunder won. I just held on." "You did far more than hold on," Thomas said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "You rode like a champion, sweetheart. Your mother would have been so proud." The race officials confirmed the results, presenting Zelda with the $5,000 prize purse in an envelope that felt impossibly light for such a life-changing amount of money. 60% went to Zelda as agreed, giving her $3,000 for the ranch debt plus an extra share, while Caleb received his 40%. But when Zelda tried to give Caleb his portion, he gently pushed her hand away. "Keep it all," he said. Use it to modernize your ranch, buy quality breeding stock, make improvements. Consider it an investment in our future." "Our future," Zelda repeated, hope surging in her chest. Caleb took both her hands in his, seemingly oblivious to the crowd still milling around the finish line. "Zelda Sullivan, these past 3 weeks have been the happiest of my life. You are brilliant, brave, beautiful, and everything I never knew I was looking for. I love you, completely and without reservation. And if you will have me, if you could find it in your heart to love me back, I would like to spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of you." "Are you proposing?" Zelda asked, her voice shaking. "I am," Caleb confirmed, dropping to one knee right there in the dusty street. "Will you marry me, Zelda? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love?" "Yes," Zelda said, the word coming out as a joyful shout. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Caleb surged to his feet and kissed her, and the crowd that had gathered erupted in cheers and applause. When they finally separated, both laughing and crying at once, Zelda saw her father beaming with approval and Thunder standing nearby looking pleased with himself, as if he understood exactly what he had helped accomplish. The next few months passed in a whirlwind of activity and joy. Zelda paid off the ranch debt in full, watching with satisfaction as the bank clerk who had dismissed her so casually was forced to stamp the loan as satisfied and return the deed to her father. With the remaining money, they made critical repairs to the ranch, replaced aging equipment, and purchased several quality heifers to rebuild their breeding program. The wedding was held in September, a simple but beautiful ceremony at the church in Council Bluffs with most of the town attending. Zelda wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved all these years, and carried wildflowers picked from the prairie. Caleb stood at the altar looking handsome in a new suit, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked down the aisle on her father's arm. "I love you," he mouthed as she reached him. "I love you too," she mouthed back. The minister kept the ceremony short, sensing the couple's eagerness to begin their new life together. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed Zelda with such tender passion that several of the older ladies in attendance fanned themselves and whispered approvingly. The reception was held at the Quinton Ranch, which was now officially Zelda's home as well. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself preparing a feast, and Jack the foreman played his fiddle for dancing. Thomas Sullivan stood in a corner looking happier than Zelda had seen him since before her mother died, chatting with neighbors and friends who had worried about his future. "Thank you," Zelda whispered to Caleb as they danced together under the stars, "for everything, for believing in me, for helping save our ranch, for loving me." "Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy," Caleb responded, holding her close. "You have given me everything I did not know I needed." They spent their wedding night in the master bedroom of the ranch house, finally alone after weeks of propriety and careful chaperoning. Zelda was nervous, having no experience in such matters, but Caleb was patient and tender, making her feel cherished and desired. "I love you," he whispered against her skin as they came together. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Zelda responded, losing herself in the physical expression of their emotional bond. The months that followed established the pattern of their life together. Thomas continued living at the Sullivan Ranch, now financially stable and slowly rebuilding its herd with Caleb's advice and occasional financial help. He visited the Quinton Ranch often, becoming like a second father to Caleb and a beloved grandfather figure to the ranch hands. Zelda threw herself into learning every aspect of the Quinton Ranch operation, working alongside Caleb to make decisions about breeding programs, land management, and business strategy. She discovered she had a talent for the business side of ranching, handling negotiations with buyers and keeping detailed financial records that helped them maximize profits. Thunder, who Caleb formally gifted to Zelda after the race as promised, became the foundation of a successful breeding program. His offspring commanded premium prices, and within 2 years, the ranch's reputation for quality horses was known throughout Iowa and Nebraska. But the greatest joy came in their personal life. Zelda and Caleb's love deepened with each passing day, their initial passion maturing into something stronger and more enduring. They still rode down to the river every evening to watch the sunset, talking about their day and making plans for the future. They still stole kisses in the barn and held hands at the dinner table, much to Mrs. Chen's amusement. In the spring of 1880, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She told Caleb by the river at sunset, their special place, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, picked her up and spun her around, then set her down carefully as if she might break. "We are going to have a baby," he kept repeating, his voice full of wonder. "Our baby, a family. Are you happy?" Zelda asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Caleb said, kneeling down to press his ear against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one, this is your father speaking. I want you to know that you are already so loved, so wanted. Your mother and I cannot wait to meet you." Zelda ran her fingers through his hair, feeling so full of love and contentment that she thought she might burst. 2 years ago, she had been desperate and afraid, facing the loss of everything she held dear. Now she had a husband who adored her, a successful ranch, financial security, and a baby on the way. Life had exceeded her wildest dreams. The pregnancy was not easy. Zelda suffered from terrible nausea in the first few months and swelling ankles later, but Caleb was attentive and supportive, taking over more of her ranch duties and making sure she rested. Mrs. Chen cooked special foods to tempt her appetite, and Thomas visited almost daily to check on his daughter and grandchild-to-be. In December of 1880, during a snowstorm that blanketed the ranch in white, Zelda went into labor. Caleb rode through the storm to fetch the doctor from Council Bluffs, refusing to leave his wife's care to chance. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 18 hours, but finally, just as dawn broke on a bright winter morning, their son entered the world with a healthy cry. "A boy," the doctor announced, placing the baby in Zelda's arms. "Congratulations, Mrs. Quinton." Zelda looked down at her son's tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, and felt love overwhelm her. Caleb was beside her instantly, his arm around her shoulders as they gazed at their child together. "He is beautiful," Caleb whispered, "just like his mother." "He has your eyes," Zelda observed, noting the blue shade already visible. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without reaching a decision. But looking at their son now, Caleb said, "What about Thomas? After your father?" Zelda's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas Quinton. It is perfect." Thomas Sullivan wept openly when they told him, holding his grandson with the careful tenderness of a man who had thought he might never see his daughter happy or safe again. "He looks like your mother," Thomas told Zelda. "Around the eyes and mouth. She would have loved him so much." "She does love him," Zelda said firmly. "Wherever she is, she loves all of us." The years continued to pass, marked by hard work, deep love, and growing prosperity. Young Thomas was joined by a sister named Catherine in 1882, a brother named Michael in 1884, and twin girls named Rose and Rachel in 1886. The ranch house rang with children's laughter, and Caleb proved to be a devoted father who was not too dignified to get down on the floor and play with his kids, or read them stories before bed. The Sullivan Ranch was eventually merged with the Quinton Ranch after Thomas passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1885, combining the properties into a single large operation. Zelda insisted on keeping the Sullivan name alive by calling the southern section Sullivan Pastures, honoring her father's legacy. Thunder sired champions until his death at age 22, and his bloodline continued through his many offspring. The horse race that had brought Zelda and Caleb together became a cherished family story, told and retold to each generation of children who grew up on the ranch. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1889, Caleb and Zelda rode down to the river at sunset, leaving the children in Mrs. Chen's capable hands for a few hours alone. They sat on the bank watching the water flow past, Caleb's arm around Zelda's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "Do you ever regret it?" Caleb asked. "Marrying me, merging your life with mine, giving up your independence?" Zelda sat up to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes that still appeared sometimes when he questioned his worthiness of her love. "Not for one single second," she said firmly. "Caleb, you saved me in every way a person can be saved. You gave me hope when I had none, believed in me when I did not believe in myself, and loved me when I felt unlovable. These past 10 years have been the best of my life." "Even the hard parts?" Caleb asked. "The difficult pregnancies, the long winters, the droughts and cattle diseases, and all the struggles, especially the hard parts," Zelda said, "because we faced them together. You stood beside me through everything, and I stood beside you. That is what marriage means, what love means. Not just sharing the good times, but weathering the storms together." Caleb kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. "I love you, Zelda Quinton, more today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. You are my heart, my home, my everything." "And you are mine," Zelda responded. "My cowboy, my champion, my love." They stayed by the river until the stars came out, talking about their children's futures and plans for the ranch, stealing kisses like newlyweds, and thanking whatever fate or fortune had brought them together that day in Council Bluffs so many years ago. The ranch continued to thrive into the new century. All 5 children grew up learning the cattle and horse business, each contributing their unique talents to the family operation. Thomas Jr. became a skilled horse trainer. Catherine showed a gift for business management. Michael loved the cattle breeding program, and the twins Rose and Rachel developed a popular riding school that taught proper horsemanship to children from nearby towns. Caleb and Zelda grew old together, their hair graying and their faces lining, but their love never diminished. They still rode together when their bodies allowed, though they traded Thunder's offspring for gentler mounts as the years passed. They still watched the sunset by the river, Caleb's hand always seeking Zelda's, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. In 1920, at age 64, Zelda sat in a rocking chair on the front porch of the ranch house, watching her grandchildren play in the yard. Caleb sat beside her, now 67 and moving more slowly than he once had, but still strong and vital in the ways that mattered. They held hands as they had for the past 40 years, their weathered fingers perfectly matched. "You remember the race?" Zelda asked, as she often did when the mood turned reflective. "Every detail," Caleb said, smiling, "though I confess I still feel a bit guilty about holding Thunder back at the end." "Do not," Zelda said firmly. "If you had not, we might never have had this life, these children and grandchildren, this love. Besides, I won the real race fair and square." "What race was that?" Caleb asked, though his eyes twinkled with knowing. "The race for your heart," Zelda said. "You told me I had already won that, and you were right. Everything else, the money and the ranch and the success, It all paled in comparison to winning your love. And you winning mine, Caleb added. Though truth be told, I am not sure there was ever a competition. From the moment I saw you outside that bank, looking so determined and fierce despite your troubles, I think my heart recognized its match. Everything after that was just the details working themselves out. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in familiar shades of orange and gold. Young Thomas, now almost 40 himself with children of his own, approached the porch with a question about the breeding program. Catherine followed with paperwork requiring their signatures. Michael brought news of cattle prices. Rose and Rachel reported that their riding school was expanding, requiring another barn. Caleb and Zelda addressed each issue with the wisdom of decades of experience, their minds still sharp even as their bodies aged. When the children finally dispersed to handle their various responsibilities, the elderly couple returned to their peaceful observation of the ranch they had built together. "No regrets?" Zelda asked, the question that had become a tradition between them. "None," Caleb said firmly. "Not a single one. You." "Only that I did not meet you sooner," Zelda said, "that we did not have even more years together." "We have had a good run," Caleb said contentedly. "Longer and happier than most people get, and we are not done yet. I plan to celebrate at least our 50th anniversary with you, maybe our 60th if we are stubborn enough." Zelda laughed, the sound still musical even after all these years. "Deal. 50 years minimum, preferably 60. We will be that old couple everyone talks about, the ones who still hold hands and kiss in public and embarrass their grandchildren." "I look forward to it," Caleb said, bringing her hand to his lips. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, they rose from their rocking chairs, moving with the careful coordination of longtime partners, and walked into the house arm in arm. Behind them, the ranch settled into evening routines, cattle lowing in the distance, horses nickering in the barn, ranch hands heading to the bunkhouse for dinner. Everything they had built, everything they had fought for and dreamed of, spread out around them like a living testament to the power of love, determination, and taking chances on unlikely strangers. The foreclosure notice that had driven Zelda into town that fateful day in 1878 was now a yellowed piece of paper in a scrapbook, a relic of a nightmare that had transformed into a fairy tale. The race had changed everything, but not in the way anyone might have predicted. The real prize had never been the money or the glory or the saving of a struggling ranch, though all of those things had been important at the time. The real prize had been finding each other, building a life together, creating a legacy that would extend far beyond their own years. In the end, Zelda had challenged the cowboy to a horse race. He had let her win and said she had already won his heart. And somehow that simple exchange had blossomed into a love story that would be told and retold by their descendants for generations. It was a story of courage and kindness, of taking risks and believing in possibilities, of two people who found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from desperation and hope. And every night, as Caleb and Zelda lay in bed together, their bodies curved together with the comfort of long familiarity, they silently thanked whatever force had brought them together. Because in finding each other, they had found everything that mattered, everything that made life worth living. Their story did not end with dramatic flourishes or tragic separations. Instead, it unfolded steadily through the years, marked by quiet moments of joy, by children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward, by a ranch that prospered under their careful stewardship, and most importantly, by a love that never wavered or diminished but only grew stronger with each passing day. The cowboy and the ranch girl who had met by chance and married by choice lived out their days in contentment and love, proving that sometimes, just sometimes, taking a chance on a stranger and racing toward an impossible dream could lead to everything your heart desired and more than you ever dared to hope for. And when they were both gone, many years later, their children gathered in the ranch house and found, tucked in a drawer in the master bedroom, two items carefully preserved: the newspaper clipping announcing the Iowa Territorial Cup race of 1878 and a pressed wildflower from Zelda's wedding bouquet. Beneath both, in Caleb's strong handwriting, was a note that read, "She challenged me to win her heart. I spent every day of my life trying to be worthy of that victory. I hope I succeeded." And beneath that, in Zelda's more delicate script, "You succeeded beyond measure, my love. In every way that matters, we both won." The ranch stands to this day, passed down through generations of Quintons who still breed championship horses and quality cattle, who still watch sunsets by the river, and who still tell the story of their great-great-grandparents who fell in love over a horse race and built an empire on courage, determination, and the simple willingness to take a chance on love. It is a story worth remembering, worth retelling, worth believing in, because it reminds us that sometimes, when we are at our lowest and most desperate, that is exactly when magic can happen. Sometimes a stranger becomes the love of your life. Sometimes losing leads to winning. Sometimes a race changes everything, not because of where it takes you, but because of who it brings into your life. And sometimes, just sometimes, when you challenge a cowboy and he lets you win, it is because you have already won the only prize that truly matters, his heart, freely given and yours to keep forever.